Hello everybody, Zeidoktor here, and this episode of the Typical Manga Review is going to be dedicated to One Piece, Chapter 840, The Iron Mask. We get a nice little cover here this week, a fan request one here, like we usually get between the side stories nowadays, of Chopper eating honey with all the bears of the series. This includes Kumashi, or Bearsy, I forget what his official name is, Perona's bear, Beppo, Drum Kingdom's hiking bear, and Bartholomew Kuma. Like they're all eating, and it specifically notes it's like they're eating honey like Pooh Bear, like Winnie the Pooh. Meanwhile, in the background, we see a bunch of bees heading their way. That will not end well. And the chapter properly just picks up where we left off before, with Sanji seeing a whole bunch of giant tubes filled with people. Um, as Yanji explains, as Sanji notes, the fact that they're floating in water and all have the same face. Yanji notes it's a bioculture liquid, and reveals that human beings can be built, and that he reminds us that Jerma has been a nation of science, and that in fact their own father is actually a brilliant scientist. Before they were born, he participated in a research team that was skirting the law in foreign territory. He was studying and developing weapons with Dr. Vegapunk himself. In his younger days, at the time, Vegapunk's great discovery was the presence of bloodline elements in living things, Yanji explains. It was very nearly a step into the realm of godhood. In essence, he found the blueprints of life. The world government felt threatened by this and arrested Vegapunk, and the research team was half disbanded, half absorbed by the government. But Vinsmoke Judge escaped them and continued his research alone there at Dirma, and the research into copying and augmenting life itself, he calls it. And thus we have this particular facility where all of the soldiers Sanji sees are copies of just a few superior fighters, clone soldiers. Of course, none of them have a clue about this. None of them are aware of the fact. And in fact, we just see a whole bunch of them just going about their days as just happy as can be. Yonji goes on that all the countries look on their forces with fear, as well as admiration and desire. It only makes sense. I mean, they are mighty, subservient, programmed to be fearless in the face of death, and utterly faithful. If they die, they're replaced, easily. It only takes 5 years to create a 20-year-old soldier. And this is their military storage depot. As he kind of goes on about how it's like, it only takes 5 years, but it's like they've all lived 20. Like Sanji just shuts him up at that moment, like he's going to be sick. And then the other brothers pop in, like, when we heard you were a pirate, we thought maybe our little failure was actually growing up a bit. And it turned out you were as big a disappointment as ever. And he's pretty furious at Niji at the moment because of what he did to Cassette. And, as Sanji will always do when someone hurts a woman in his presence, he kicks him in the face. Boot to the head. Boot to the head. But before I can go too far with this, Ichiji explains that reminds him that they still have hostage of theirs in the East Blue. And Niji uses a stealth system, gets out of the way, and pops up behind, grabbing Sanji from behind. And then there's back kicks him with electricity, warning him not to fight back or blood will run into East Blue. If I'd known that, I wouldn't. You have a thing for that kitchen maid? If I'd known that, I wouldn't have smashed her face. We can make her your personal servant if you don't mind her being seriously wounded. And Ichiji kind of steps back in, welcoming him back to the Vinsmoke Sanji, and is that it's high time to reestablish the hierarchy here. You are a failure. And then we get a proper flashback going here, where Judge is looming over his 5 children, 0 through 4, telling them that they were born to be greater than human. You will be unbound by the foolish, naive ways of the world, grow to eventually lead your own military forces, and one day rule German 666 with the ever-loving power of science. I have given you ability, the rest comes down to discipline. And all 5 of them are pretty much all in, they're on board. But then we got to actually see the training, jumping off from high places just onto solid ground, running, jumping over flaming hurdles, swimming in the ocean. And Sanji can do none of this. He's not able to pull off any of it whatsoever. Instead, he seems to be interested in actually studying science and actually looking at examining. But the brothers are just pick on him, and when he tries to fight back, they beat the crap out of him. And as this goes on, Judge is wondering why Sanji is so weak. He's lagging so far behind everybody else. And it's like Ichiji, Niji, and Yonji are making excellent progress. I mean, their exoskeletons are developing well. And that might explain actually the panel just above that where Sanji tries to hit Niji with the wooden sword and just like breaks over him without even flinching. Plus, we had a ding earlier, I remember now, where Sanji tried to punch someone and just broke his hand. Little Sanji, not adult Sanji, obviously. Right? But the guy who's talking to Judge, like, those three, their resilience and strength are equivalent to full-grown men. But for Sanji, well, sorry to say, he might be considered a failure. The manipulation of bloodline elements should have worked for all four of them, and yet somehow it is no different. He is no different than the way he was born. Sanji is nothing but a human. What just angers Judge. And meanwhile, we see Sanji reading to himself while the rat is actually eating his food. But Sanji doesn't mind. He's like, "Go on, eat up. I cooked it for you." We also see that Sanji is actually reading some books here, and particularly Nolan the Liar and a book about devil fruit. So that explains a couple of things. But before this can go really much further, Judge jumps in, like demanding if Sanji's cooking food for rats again. "Royalty does not serve. How many times must I tell you this? Your mother is dead. Stop chasing her shadow. Unlike your..." And then he just digs into him. "Unlike your sibling, you have no talent by birth. Therefore, you must have 10 times, work 10 times, 100 times as hard to make up the difference. You are a piece of my plan to restore German to glory. Do not let me down." And he orders Sanji to never cook again. But things don't change. I mean, Sanji gets beaten up. The only apparent comfort seems to be Reiju, who laughs along with him, but also bandages Sanji privately. Like, if I try to stop them, they'll pick on me too. Nobody wants that. And Judge, seeing that Sanji has a total lack of future promise, he's just a waste of life. Damn, dude. Right. So we see that everybody's mourning Sanji, who apparently died in some unthinkable shipwreck. Like, Judge is putting on the face of mourning him. Like, the five children are supposed to lead German to the future together. But what we actually see is like some of the soldiers are. Sanji actually has like an iron mask placed on him, while the brothers are wondering if he's really dead. I don't know. Who really cares anyway? Rage is the only one who's like seems to be thinking something else is up. But Sanji has been stuck in the cell with a iron mask over his face, like screaming that he does not want to be there, like calling for help. But his guards are like unsympathetic since it was the king's decision. He wants to make it so you are never born. And we see Sanji just crying, screaming like, "Let me out! I'm sorry for being born weak. Help me, please!" And that's right where the chapter ends. So we haven't gotten the proper flashback mode. So next week, I'm assuming, is going to be how Sanji got the hell out of there, and probably how he wound up with Zeph. Well, we know that, but I mean, like how he wound up on the ship that wound up with Zeph. Reiju seems to be the wild card among this whole thing. Like, she seems to be sympathetic to Sanji, but she's not going to act out against anybody right now. And it's also used to the fact that these guys are literally clone soldiers. All the soldiers on there. That's, like I said, we got that reveal pretty clearly last week, or week before last. And it certainly explains why these guys don't have much value for life beyond their own, because these guys are clones. That's why I almost really, what I want to see now with this revelation, because Yonji himself said it, they don't know they're clones. How much you want to bet that not only are the Vinsmoke brothers, if not Reiju as well, also clones, but that none of them realize this? That's going to be, if that actually comes out, that's going to be quite a shock, and I can see Sanji possibly being the one to stick it out. Like, maybe being glad about that fact in a way. Let's see here, trying to think what else I want to get. Like I said, not too much that we didn't already have figured out or theorized here. The idea that Sanji spent his childhood in an iron mask does kind of like give Duval a whole different little perspective. I don't know if that makes it funnier or less funny. I don't know. I'll let you guys pick. We also saw a little callback to the fact that Sanji knew the stories of Noland and also had read about Devil Fruit before. Actually, come to think of it, that probably gives his desire for the invisibility fruit a whole new meaning. Because that was the one Devil Fruit he wanted. Naked girls! he wanted to do so that he could help people. Naked girls. Yeah, we pretty much know what Sanji actually wanted with it, but I wonder if that was actually true back then. That's actually kind of an interesting idea now that I think about it. Because I don't know, because Sanji hasn't really like expressed anything like that. That seemed to be something that came up when he was with Zeph. The other thing I kind of come up with here as well is it seems to be a common thing with royalty in One Piece, or at least maybe like really arrogant royalty like Judge or the Celestial Dragons, where something being human is bad, or at least simply human is bad. It's like they see themselves as a cut above everything, which is not surprising, but still, it's an interesting little thing to take note of or for them to do. I'm trying to think here. But like I said, the one thing I do like about this whole reveal with the clone soldier thing is we were told from the beginning that Jerma wanted a was supposed to be like a kingdom of science, but we didn't really see that beyond the Sentai theme. I think I talked about this last week as well, or last chapter. But now we actually have like a full-on proper thing going with this. So that's actually very cool. Right. Let's see here. Sorry to kind of cut this one short. For some reason, I don't have as much to talk about this time as I did about Hero Academia chapter. But like I said, it's an interesting chapter, like a lot of exposition going on here. A lot into Sanji's flashback. I expect next week will be more of the flashback, possibly seeing how he escaped Jerma 66 and wound up as a cabin boy on a cruise ship, and possibly what Jerma themselves did at the time. So we might see a bit of that. Because this doesn't seem to be strictly from Sanji's viewpoint. It actually seems to be more from Judge's viewpoint, really. That's the thing with flashbacks in One Piece. Like they're presented in a way where there's no real set viewpoint, so to speak. Even though like the flashback might be starting with one particular person, like Sanji in this case. Normally that kind of annoys me because we're seeing stuff that Sanji couldn't possibly know, but at the same time, delivery's enough. I don't mind it, I guess. That said, it did kind of completely turn me off to Tenjo Tenge, so we'll see. But I think One Piece just has a history of their flashbacks being able to deliver. I also noticed, like in this case, like there were comments about Sanji cooking for us before this. Like I think most people took it like figuratively, like he was cooking for commoners or cooking for the servants. But nope, they meant it literally. He was actually cooking for rodents. Which again, like funny little thing to note right there. Let's see here. Sorry, I was just slipping through here trying to see if there's anything else I want to bring up, but I think I'm good for now. Like I said, this really hasn't like told us all that much that we didn't already know or have an idea of. Just more of a how and why type of situation. So I think it answers more questions than it gives to kind of reverse the usual phrase. Because we already knew like the Vince folks were scumbags. So we now knew they were cloning people. So I think I'll go ahead and just call this review here. I can't think of anything else to add on that I probably didn't already bring up in just describing the chapter. So in that case, I'm going to call the review here. That has been my review of One Piece Chapter 840, The Iron Mask. Y'all have a good time, and we'll see you next week.